What if there was a completely legal way to set aside hundreds of thousands of dollars for a family member with a disability, and at the same time protect your own age pension entitlements? What if the Australian government had actually built this strategy into the law, and most Australians eligible to use it have never even heard of it? Today I am going to walk you through the Special Disability Trust, what it is, how it works, what has been updated for 2026, and why this could be one of the most powerful retirement and family protection strategies available to you right now. Stay with me because this one is genuinely life-changing for the families it applies to. Let me start with a question. Do you have a family member with a severe disability, a child, a sibling, even a spouse, who is going to need care and financial support for the rest of their life? If the answer is yes, then you are likely sitting on a planning opportunity that most financial advisors never bring up in client meetings. Not because it doesn't work, but because it is complex, it requires specialist knowledge, and frankly, most advisors simply are not across the detail. That changes today. The Special Disability Trust, or SDT as it is commonly known, was introduced by the Australian government specifically to help families provide for the long-term care and accommodation needs of a family member with a severe disability. And here is the part that makes it extraordinary from a retirement planning perspective. Contributions made to a Special Disability Trust by eligible family members attract a gifting concession. That means you can contribute to this trust above and beyond the normal Centrelink gifting limits, and it will not trigger a deprivation assessment. Let me say that again because it is important. You can put money into this trust without Centrelink treating it as a deprived asset. For families trying to protect both their disabled loved one and their own pension, this is enormous. So, let's break down exactly how it works. A Special Disability Trust is a legal trust structure set up specifically for the benefit of a person with a severe disability. The beneficiary, the person with the disability, must meet specific eligibility criteria set by Services Australia. They need to have a severe disability or medical condition. That means they are unlikely to work more than 7 hours per week at or above the minimum wage. They need to have care needs that are significant, and they generally need to be of workforce age, meaning between school-leaving age and age pension age. The trust is managed by a trustee, usually a family member or professional trustee, and the funds inside the trust can only be used for the beneficiary's care and accommodation needs. There are strict rules about what the money can and cannot be spent on, and the trust must be managed in accordance with Centrelink's guidelines at all times. Now here is where the 2026 update becomes critically important. The gifting concession amount, that is the maximum amount an eligible contributor can put into a special disability trust without it being assessed as a deprived asset, is indexed and adjusted periodically. For 2026, the gifting concession sits at $500,000 per eligible contributor. That is $500,000 that you can contribute to a special disability trust, and Centrelink will not count it as a gift under the deprivation rules. It simply reduces your assessable assets by that amount, legitimately, legally, and with full government backing. If you are a couple and both of you are eligible contributors, that means up to $1 million combined can potentially be contributed with this concession applying. The numbers here are significant. But I want to be careful here because I know some of you are now thinking, great, I'll just set one up and funnel money into it. It is not that simple, and I want to give you the full picture so you go into this with your eyes open. First, the eligibility requirements for the beneficiary are strict, and they are assessed by Services Australia. You cannot simply declare that a family member has a disability and establish the trust. The disability must be severe and well documented, usually through medical evidence from treating specialists. Services Australia reviews the application and makes a determination. If the beneficiary does not meet the criteria, the trust cannot be established as a special disability trust, and the gifting concession does not apply. Second, the funds inside the trust are restricted. They can be used for the beneficiary's care needs, things like accommodation, medical expenses, therapy, daily care support, and some discretionary spending up to a capped annual amount. They cannot be used for general family expenses, investments, or to benefit anyone other than the beneficiary. The trustee has real responsibilities here and must keep accurate records of all expenditure. Centrelink can and does audit special disability trusts to ensure compliance. Third, there are tax considerations. The trust itself is a separate tax entity, and depending on how income is earned and distributed, there may be tax obligations that need to be managed. Getting proper tax advice specific to your trust structure is not optional. It is essential. Now, let me talk about why this is such a powerful strategy for retirees and pre-retirees specifically, because this is where it gets really compelling. Imagine you are in your early 60s. You have an adult child with a severe disability. You have been informally supporting them for years, paying their bills, covering their care costs, managing their life. You are approaching retirement and you are worried about two things simultaneously. You are worried about what will happen to your child when you are no longer around or no longer able to provide that support. And you are worried about whether your own assets will disqualify you from the age pension when you retire. A properly structured special disability trust addresses both of those concerns at the same time. You contribute to the trust up to the gifting concession limit, and those funds are set aside permanently for your child's care. Your assessable assets for pension purposes are reduced. Your child has a formal, legally protected pool of funds that will continue to provide for them even after you are gone. The trustee structure ensures that the funds are managed appropriately and cannot be misused. And because the trust is a formal legal entity, it provides protections that informal family arrangements simply cannot offer. This is also incredibly important from an estate planning perspective. When you pass away, assets that sit outside a special disability trust form part of your estate and go through your will. Depending on your family circumstances, this can create conflict, delays, and uncertainty about whether your disabled family member will actually receive what you intended for them. Assets inside a special disability trust are already quarantined and protected. They do not go through probate in the same way. The care and accommodation of your family member is secured regardless of what happens with the rest of your estate. There is also an asset exemption for the beneficiary themselves. The assets held inside a special disability trust, up to the concessional amount, are exempt from the assets test when assessing the beneficiary's own Centrelink payments, so the disabled person can hold significant assets inside the trust without it affecting their disability support pension or other Centrelink entitlements. This is a double benefit. The contributor's pension is protected, and the beneficiary's pension is protected simultaneously. I also want to address the question of what happens if circumstances change. What if the beneficiary passes away before the trust assets are exhausted? In that case, the remaining assets in the trust can be distributed to the residuary beneficiaries of the trust, usually the estate of the principal beneficiary, according to the trust deed. The assets do not simply disappear. They are handled in accordance with the legal structure that was established. This is another reason why the trust deed itself must be carefully drafted from the very beginning by a solicitor who specializes in this area. So, what are your action steps right now? The first thing to do is assess eligibility. Does your family member meet the criteria for a severe disability under Services Australia's definition? Get the medical documentation together and speak to a specialist who can give you a realistic assessment of whether an application is likely to succeed. Second, get specialist legal advice on the trust deed. This is not a standard trust document. It must comply with the specific requirements under the Social Security Act for special disability trusts. A general solicitor who does not regularly work in this area is not the right person to draft this document. Third, get financial advice that covers both the contribution strategy and the tax implications. How much should you contribute and when? What assets are best transferred into the trust? How does the contribution interact with your overall retirement plan and pension strategy? These are questions that require a comprehensive financial plan, not a one-size-fits-all answer. Fourth, Register the trust with Services Australia before you make any contributions. The gifting concession only applies to contributions made to a trust that has been formally registered. Contributing before registration is confirmed could mean those contributions are treated as ordinary gifts and deprivation rules apply. The sequence matters. Here is the truth about special disability trusts. They are one of the most generous and genuinely well-designed provisions in the Australian social security system. The government has created a real pathway for families to protect vulnerable loved ones while also managing their own retirement security. But like all powerful tools, they only work when they are used correctly, set up properly, and managed with care. If you have a family member with a severe disability and you are approaching retirement, this is not a conversation to put off. The earlier you establish the trust and begin contributing, the more protected both you and your loved one will be. Time is genuinely your most valuable asset here. If this video opened your eyes to something you had never considered before, please share it with every family you know who is caring for someone with a disability. They may never have heard of this, and it could change everything for them. Subscribe so you catch the next video, and let's keep building your knowledge so your retirement is everything you worked for it to be.